Hello everybody, good morning, I hope you're doing amazing. My name is Yorgos, I'm a Greek teacher and I have taught over 150 students how to speak Greek, and today I'm going to show you what to say in Greek when you don't understand. So we have three things to cover today. First off, the polite way to say that, then the informal way to say that, and lastly, if everything fails, your last case scenario as a way to actually understand what the person is saying. Alright, so starting off with the polite way, first off we want to say I'm sorry or excuse me. And we would say that like this. So the first one is συγγνώμη, and that means I'm sorry. And then we have με συγχωρείτε, με συγχωρείτε, and that means excuse me. It's a bit harder to pronounce, but both of those communicate the same thing. I'm sorry or excuse me. And then what you want to say is that you didn't understand very good or that you didn't understand at all. So this is how you would say that. So that would be δεν κατάλαβα καλά. And that would be I didn't understand well. Καλά. And you don't have to add καλά if you don't want to. You can just say δεν κατάλαβα, which means I didn't understand. But if you understand a little bit, you can say δεν κατάλαβα καλά, just to be a bit more exact with your wording. And what we can do now is we can actually combine the first part, which is going to be I'm sorry or excuse me, along with this in order to make a full sentence. And here it is. Συγγνώμη, δεν κατάλαβα καλά. And that is translated as I'm sorry, I didn't understand well. And then the next step to actually understanding somebody that you didn't get initially is to ask them to repeat again. This is how we would do that. We would say μπορείτε να το πείτε πάλι. And that means can you say it again? And note over here the endings te, and these signify a formal way of speaking. Μπορείτε να το πείτε πάλι. And if you still do not understand, maybe you can ask them to say it a bit more slower. We would say that like this. We would say λίγο πιο αργά παρακαλώ. And that means a bit more slowly, please. This is a nice way to saying to slow down to the person you're talking to without actually using a lot of words. Λίγο πιο αργά παρακαλώ. But if you want to make it even more fuller, you can say this instead, combining it with what we learned just before. So before we saw μπορείτε να το πείτε, which means can you say it, and combining it with a bit more slower, it would be μπορείτε να το πείτε λίγο πιο αργά παρακαλώ. And that is translated as can you say it more slower, please? And then we have our informal way of actually saying all these. And here we can go actually pretty crazy. There's a lot of things that you can say in a more informal way to ask them to repeat, to communicate that you didn't understand or that you didn't hear. The first thing that we will cover though is this. Τι είπες? Τι είπες? And that means what did you say? And of course the tone of your voice matters a lot here. For example, if you say τι είπες, then that means that you probably didn't get it. But if you say in a bit aggressive way, it can sound like this. Τι είπες, which is a bit more aggressive. So always it has to do with your tone. So τι είπες, it's a bit more polite and it means that you didn't get it. And of course you can even add the fact that you maybe didn't hear or you didn't understand, because that changes of how they will communicate it back to you. So you can say this. Τι είπες, δεν κατάλαβα. Which means, what did you say? I did not understand. Or you can say, τι είπες, δεν άκουσα. What did you say? I did not hear. And then, of course, we can be even more informal with these, and we can say τι, which means what. We can say which means again, I do not really understand, Or we can say πώς, which means how. And of course, we can always ask them to repeat in an informal way as well. And that would be το λες πάλι παρακαλώ. And that means you say it again, please. very, very common in informal Greek to actually ask them to repeat again. And you can even say this, which is similar to the formal way, to ask them to say it slower. And that would be λίγο πιο αργά παρακαλώ. And that means a bit slower, please. And that is exactly the same like the one that we covered in the polite way, but you can use it here as well. And lastly, we have our emergency phrase for both the informal way and also the polite way, in case you didn't understand and no communication can be done in Greek. So with an informal way, that would be μπορείς να το πεις στα αγγλικά παρακαλώ. And that would be, can you say it in English, please? That would be the informal way, right? Because if you note over here, we have the ending of the second person in Greek, which is the is. Μπορείς να το πεις. So in case you want to say it in a formal way, you're just going to change the ending of these verbs to match the second person, plural this time, or formal. So that would be μπορείτε να το πείτε στα αγγλικά παρακαλώ. And that would be your formal way of saying the same phrase. And that means, can you say it in English, please? So depending on what you know already with Greek, you can maybe change up the sentences a little bit to match your own preferences of actually phrasing things in Greek, but generally they follow a similar pattern. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Know that if you don't really understand or get somebody in Greek, then all hope is not lost. You can actually regain your understanding of the situation if you actually repeat these phrases and the person understands you. And you know what? Communication is the goal. Even if you're not able to communicate what you want or understand the person in Greek, you can always switch to English and just understand what the person is saying, because sometimes this is more important. If you want to know more Greek, feel free to join my free Greek learning community by clicking the link in the description or in my profile.